Recently I got my hands on some old smartphones, so I decided to take a look at them and see if they are still usable in 2023. One of these devices is the Galaxy S5 Mini, released in 2014. Sure enough, I gave it a try, and this was my experience. The first thing that was noticeable to me was the size and the build quality. Since I got used to larger phones, the S5 Mini felt tiny to me, and the design is just awful to look at and to hold. I used to have a Galaxy S5, but I always hated the back of that device, and the S5 Mini is no different. This phone feels very cheap and its back is very ugly. On the other hand, the frames feel slightly more premium, even though they are plastic as well. As you can see, this phone has been used quite a bit, and it has many scratches. But since this is a very old device, it is an achievement that it still works. The back, however, has one advantage, since you could remove it yourself and swap the battery quickly. The Samsung Galaxy S5 Mini has a 4.5-inch Super AMOLED display with a 720p resolution. I tried to watch stuff on this phone, but it was very slow and everything lags. Even when trying some YouTube videos, I couldn't stand it for more than 10 seconds. Nowadays we have big smartphones and the experience is much better compared to then. The big forehead and chin are also a reminder of what we used to have. When it comes to the software, just as you'd expect, the S5 Mini is terrible. Like I said earlier, even when swiping through the app drawer it lags quite a bit. It can still open some first-party apps, but even then it is very slow, and most of the third-party apps won't even support this version anymore. You can also play some light games, but it's just a bad experience. The S5 Mini has 16GB of storage and 1.5GB of RAM, and it is very funny when we compare it with newer phones. As you can see, it runs Android 6 with the TouchWiz UI, which is loaded with bloatware. One thing that I used to like back then and I still like it now are the unlock animations. On this device we have many animations that we can put on the lock screen, and they interact when unlocking this phone. This one in particular is my favorite, but when we started to use fingerprints more they faded away. The Samsung Galaxy S5 Mini has an 8-megapixel camera on the back and a 2.1-megapixel camera on the front. Just as you'd expect, picture quality is terrible, especially with its front camera. The main camera during daylight can somewhat deliver not so bad images. There isn't any sort of HDR or dynamic range, but the pictures are kind of usable. At low light this camera becomes a lot worse. The front camera on the other hand is terrible at daylight and at low light. It can record videos at 1080p at 30 frames per second, but there isn't any stabilization at all. The S5 Mini has a mono speaker on the back, and the sound it delivers is tiny. When holding this phone in portrait, the speaker is always covered, so it makes the already tiny sound even weaker. It has, however, an advantage over current phones, and that is the headphone jack. Even though considering all the other things, the jack is here basically useless. When it comes to battery life, the S5 Mini is awful. This device has a 2100 mAh battery capacity, which is less than half of what phones have today. It was pretty bad even in 2014, and now it barely lasts me 2 or 3 hours, and even without using it. While I was testing it and looking how it performed, the battery drains just under an hour. It has, however, a convenient feature that phones nowadays don't have anymore, and that is the removable back. When doing this, you can easily access the battery and replace it, even though it is very hard to do it now since I don't think anyone sells them anymore. Charging is done with a micro USB cable which is ancient. So far I haven't been very kind with our S5 Mini, but that is about to change since this phone is packed with features. Many of those features I am about to mention were so useful back then that I am still wondering how Samsung removed them and got away. First of all, like I said earlier, the back is removable. When removing the battery, you can access the micro SD card, which got removed just recently. While we are on the back, you can also see a heart rate monitor, which is also missing from newer phones. On the top it has a headphone jack and an IR blaster. Both of them are also removed. On the front it has a home button which doubles as a fingerprint scanner, but for that I am not mad since it paved the way for bezel-less phones, and the fingerprint scanners got into the display anyways. The S5 Mini is also IP67 water and dust resistant. Phones nowadays don't really have as many features as the S5 Mini, and it kind of made me nostalgic when remembering them. So is the Galaxy S5 Mini still usable in 2023? Honestly, no, it isn't. Just as I explained earlier, it lags quite a lot and the battery drains extremely fast. The plastic build quality can be overlooked, and so can the tiny display and the mediocre camera, but the lag can't. And if the battery drains fast, the phone is basically useless. It has many features that could be useful even today, but when the performance is trash, those features are hard to justify. The S5 Mini in 2023 is only good to keep it as an old relic and become nostalgic from time to time. If you ever had the S5 Mini, let me know your experience in the comment section below, and if you did enjoy this video, a thumbs up would be appreciated. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.